Prime Time Live is coming to you from the Transform Africa Summit. Isabelle Masozera is my name, and tonight we talk digital inclusion. I'm talking to women who are doing a great job on the continent, ensuring that that is happening. Also, a gentleman that is, first of all, a sponsor for this particular event, but is also doing a lot in the same direction. With me is Pole Kwalegobe, who is the human rights activist, but also has done quite a lot. You are Miss Universe, one of the first 3 women to actually claim that title. It's wonderful to have you on the show.
Thank you very much for having me, Isabel. It's a pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. Also, I do have Andy Start, who is the president of EMASAT Global Government. You are doing so much to ensure that this event is a success. It's good to have you here.
Thanks so much. Nice to be with you this evening.
All right. And last but not least, the president of IEEE, Karen Batterson, who is doing so much. You have been described actually as the face of women inclusion when it comes to engineering, ICT, and so much. You've done incredible to ensure that women are actually included on this journey. Well, let's start from what's happening here at Transform Africa. Earlier, we were witnessing the start of this particular conference, and what stood out for me is the fact that we only have 30% representation of women, females at this particular event. It does raise concern. I'll start with you, Mpule. Why do you think that is the case?
I know that there would be sort of conversations about, but those are quite high numbers. But we really need gender parity. We need to be able to get to a point where it's 50%, and we should not be satisfied until we get there. I think what often happens when we're trying to attract girls in ICT, women in STEM, in engineering, is that we need to be able to create spaces where we're finding these women that should be participating. But I think that the fact that it's still only at 30%, definitely we could be doing more in terms of engaging young people and drawing their attention to such events like Transform Africa. We need to reach them on social media.
What do you think are the gaps?
We should have been having Twitter chats, being able to say to young people that want to be able to come, being able to have some type of a competition for women, for young women across Africa to compete, to be able to be representatives and ambassadors of their countries to the Transform Africa Summit, running it through Facebook, through Twitter, being able to say to them, why not be able to create or suggest some type of a digital innovation for women that actually gets you into Transform Africa.
I know that you've been an advocate for women's rights and girls, and it's something that you're definitely very passionate about. I'll come back to you so we can get deeper into that. Andy, your company has sponsored this event, but also I know that you have a lot of interest in what's happening in terms of ICTs across Africa. What has stood out for you throughout the sessions that happened today that you think is key during this digital transformation process?
Well, I think the first thing is that it's actually happening. The Smart Africa initiative writ large, which President Paul Kagame sponsored to make happen, is an absolutely phenomenal initiative in terms of recognizing that Africa has an opportunity to leapfrog the rest of the world. And he's putting so much effort behind that to create an event that's as exciting as this. I think I heard the numbers were something like 3,800 delegates from all across Africa. That is incredibly exciting. The Smart Africa group, of which my company, EMASAT, was the first commercial company to join, and now we're joined by many others, is a fantastic initiative to bring together the governments of Africa and industry to make a difference. And what this kind of event does is it brings industrial players from around the world who've got state-of-the-art capabilities and makes those accessible to companies and SMEs and to education here in Africa. And I'll talk. I don't want to talk all night, so I'll talk some of them about that later on.
Sure.
But the fact the event is happening is a real boost to both Rwanda and to Africa at large.
Speaking of the event happening, having women included in this and leveling the ground should be a key priority. You have control over who attends the event as organizers, as sponsors, and you have a say. Why was this neglected when it came to representation?
Well, I actually think to the contrary, it's not. if you actually look at the detail of the agenda, you'll see a strong theme of women in ICT playing throughout the agenda in a way that is much more prevalent than you would find in a similar event somewhere else on the planet. And I know my colleague in a moment will talk to you a bit about those kind of things. But actually, I think a really good job has been done for this event, which is not to say we can't do more next time.
Yes.
But it's a great start, and it's very different, and that's why it's so exciting.
Okay.
I'll come back to that once, Karen has also kind of begun to talk, because I do feel there's more to add to that.
Okay, sure. So Karen, let's get you to jump into that as well. What do you have to say about that?
So I was amazed at the 30% figure, because that is a big number.
Amazed
to
in
me.
a good way?
In a good way. In industry throughout the world, typically, and in university, we see 10 to 15%. And it's been that way for decades and decades. Things had not been changing until I come to Africa and I hear at the World Economic Forum, for instance, and certainly at Transform Africa, that it's a public agenda. We have to do this. People are finally starting to talk about it, as opposed to just saying, yes, it's a problem, and we need to do these kinds of things that have not worked. And so I am so excited to see that 30%. I think the secret going forward is going to be the role models, the examples. And if there are 30% leaders who are female here, they are now setting an example for the young girls that they can do it too.
Okay, let's have you come in.
No,
on that.
I only wanted to come back to it because I think the reason why maybe for me I'm not really, so far celebrating the 30% is because I feel we already have the formula of what we should be doing.
Absolutely.
We're just not doing it enough. So if we can just, allow me to give you an example, for example, about Rwanda and just some of the amazing things that are happening here, that if other African countries can just really take some of this and support it in the same way, that we would then have these higher numbers. So, for example, when you look across the entire pipeline, Rwanda is really investing in, all the way from girls in ICT to women in STEM. There's so many great initiatives here. So if you look at, for example, today we had Miss Geek Africa. I was very honored to be able to be a part of that and to be a judge in Miss Geek Africa, where you're hearing these amazing innovations from young women, some of them 16, 17 years old, and talking about machine learning, talking about digital health, about solar energy, about Internet of Things, and just other innovation. But even before that, this morning, we know that Her Excellency, the First Lady, and Umbuto Foundation put together a special session on smart health, and you have young people again presenting their amazing innovation. So that we're seeing in Rwanda, and then yesterday, we went to K-Lab, they had the e-skills for girls, so we're meeting these amazing young women that are coders. There's so much that is going on already in Rwanda that's supporting that. And then you have AIMS that I sit on the board of, the African Institute for Mathematical Sciences. You have Carnegie Mellon over here. So there's already something that's been done in Rwanda. Why can't the rest of Africa learn
And that's
from here?
the question exactly when it comes to inclusiveness and having women being given priority. It's something very tricky. Andy, from what you've seen around, what would you point out as a hindrance to not having the same message spread across Africa?
Hindrance is an interesting question. Let me come back to that, but let me just talk a little bit about Miss Geek, because we as a company had the opportunity to work with Miss Geek 2016, and Roseanne, who won that competition last year, is an amazing individual. I just had the pleasure of spending an hour with her, talking about what she's been doing over the last year as a result of that. And Inmarsat as a company has been actually working with her project, which is around providing irrigation systems that are controlled by ICT to use less water to grow more crops and to overcome drought. She's passionate about making a difference with that, and her enthusiasm is infectious. So I think to the point of what can you do more, I think as industry, what we can do more is to get behind those projects and provide the right sort of support.
And that's something that you brought up that I want to actually emphasize. When it comes to angel funding, finding capital for some of these young ladies is quite hard. So we saw today young girls coming forward. One of them had a smart idea about an app that ladies who are exposed to domestic violence could use rape and things that we face in today's society. And she provides a solution that you just, touch a button and help is on the way. But the chances of a girl like that finding funding outside of Miss Gig are very, very low. What do you think is the problem? And I'll come back to you. How do we make sure that we facilitate and create platforms that bring access to funding for these women, a deliberate approach to that?
I think, as with everything, it's a matter of getting the message out. So if you have this beautiful app and nobody knows about it, then people aren't going to be interested in investing. So a couple of things. If a young woman like that with her app is able to advertise it and get some exposure at an event like this, there may be many investors who get excited. But the other thing we were talking about before we started this session live is social media. So if she can put herself out there on any of the social channels, look what I have, she will attract people and the world will spread.
I think it's actually already happening, to be honest with you. Several years ago, I was asked by the president of the World Food Prize to be a judge for a new fellowship competition that was being sponsored by Howard Buffett called 40 Chances. And I was one of the judges for Rwanda. There's a young woman, Lillian Uwintwali, who won. And the fellowship comes with amazing support. So I think already there's a certain resourcefulness of our young women.
I feel like because we can pinpoint these chances, that already says a lot about how available they are. They're not that available.
But I think
there's a unique opportunities, and I want to talk to the three of you. What are the deliberate steps
the deliberate
that
steps
are being taken?
The deliberate steps is that we actually do need to unlock capital for women. It's not going to happen in the absence of that, because in terms of if the competition is there, they will reach it. They will get to know about it. You'll wonder to yourself, how do they know about this competition that's taking place in this part of the world? Because they're on social media. They're on Twitter, they're on Facebook, they're on Pinterest, they're on Instagram, they're on every platform you can imagine. But the question is, we don't have enough funding. We need everything. We need angel funding. We need venture funding. We need funds that are just geared for women in tech, young women to develop innovative platforms. We need fintech funds. I mean, we actually just need to unlock capital for women, because capital is the lifeblood of innovation, is the lifeblood of building a business. But how many funds can you really think about that we can say these are exclusive to young entrepreneurs, young women in ICT and in technology, so that they can build their businesses?
All right, let's talk about connectivity. And this was an issue earlier we talked about. Before the show, we're actually talking about how we don't have that many women that have access to the internet. 45% lagging behind how many men actually have access to internet. Do you think something is missing? What is missing? What is going on? Because wherever there's a man that can have a smartphone, a woman can too.
I think it's important for both these subjects around financing and around connectivity and access to recognise this is not a women-only problem for Africa. It's a problem for Africa. Now, I think you can then start to look at how do I then add to that to close the gap also for women. But you need to address the gap for Africa. There's a funding problem for young tech entrepreneurs in Africa, whether they're male or female, and we need to do things around that. There are very clear opportunities to do that, and Smart Africa creates an opportunity as a forum that has all of the heads of state of multiple nations. I think there are up to 17 nations now. That creates an opportunity to put frameworks in place that makes it easier to provide funding and easier to scale. Now, if we can build into those frameworks as a minimum an equality, and as a preference a positive bias, you can start to do some really interesting things. And we're starting to talk about those dynamics here at this conference. I was in the Smart Africa Steering Board earlier in the week, and we're already talking about those funding mechanisms and frameworks. Coming to the issue of connectivity, we're at an incredibly exciting time. We're aided by the pace of advance of innovation that is going on in the technology industry globally, and companies like ours that are global are able to bring those capabilities to Africa. So to give you an example, fiber rollout. One of our colleague companies, an African-based business, is rolling out fiber at an unprecedented rate across Africa. It's something crazy like 150 kilometers a month. of new fibre going in. But even if we roll fibre out at that speed, we're still going to leave large proportions of the continent unconnected. And particularly when you're talking about agricultural Africa, you're talking about rural Africa, and that's a big issue for women because the majority of agricultural workers in Africa, more agricultural workers in Africa are female than male. That connectivity is an issue, but we can close that gap because the technology advances in satellite communications have rolled on so much that the cost of it is plummeting. So I think we're going to see over the next 10 years an ability to access technology that gives you access to the internet at an incredible rate. Now, once you've done that, you've then got to say, have I still got a gender imbalance? My guess, just looking at the rollout across other nations, is that gender imbalance will start to close, because I don't know a young person in Europe who doesn't see access to the internet as a human right. They're absolutely committed to it.
When you say it that way, it makes sense for the Western world. Here in Africa, it's not yet a right because, again, the statistics speak for themselves. The access to internet, it's not something that is actually causing us smile lately. But let's go back to my question. Bridging that gap, how do we leverage that? Bridging that gap, and we make sure that the girl, the woman, has equal access to the internet. How do we make sure of that? And I'm going to come to you, Karen.
A lot of this, I think, goes back to the basic educational needs. So if young girls in school learn what is the internet, how do I use it, how does it help me, then I think that can help bridge that divide as well. And I've heard stories about how women are afraid to go online because they don't feel comfortable for various reasons. IEEE has efforts in cybersecurity and cyber privacy. Those are the most critical aspects of connectivity, in my opinion, and any of the technologies that we're advancing. So when you talk about something like the Internet of Things, where devices are connected to each other, the first question is my privacy protected? Is it secure? So one of the themes I heard both at World Economic Forum here and Transform Africa, when we talk about smart cities, which is the theme this year, we want to talk about safe cities as well, safe and smart. And I think if we get to that point where it feels safe to be online, then perhaps that will help with some of this problem that you're talking about.
And I'm going to bring you in on this because I know you're a mother, I'm a mother as well. And my little girl, when she turned 6, she said, "Mom, I want an iPad." And then my house has Wi-Fi, and somehow she knows how to get on the internet. And half the time I am scared to death because I'm thinking, oh my God, I can't always be there to control what she has access to. And also bringing in the safety issue, like Karen was saying earlier, women are deliberately choosing not to go on the internet because they don't feel safe, from leaking images to all of these things. So are there protection plans being made to ensure that the women, how do we protect the women so they feel more safe?
Well, I think there's a two-part answer to what you just said, because I want to go back to just the one of being a mother, because I am the mother of a 10-year-old boy. I also have a 10-month-old baby, but I'll talk about the 10-year-old boy. He loves to play on Scratch, which is created by MIT and is really a coding platform, but it's designed in such a way that he doesn't even know that that's what he's doing. So when I look at my 10-year-old and the fact that he's very comfortable talking about robotics and talking about nanotechnology and talking about all these things and talking about coding, then I wonder to myself, though, that are we doing enough to be able to encourage the 10-year-old girl to also be very comfortable doing this? Do we have those 10-year-old girls that are talking nonstop about coding, about robotics, about all kinds of technologies? So for me, these are the questions I'm asking is, do we let young women feel comfortable, the environment at school, teacher, society? Does it say...
Comfort is a good thing,
yes,
but comfort might come at a cost. And again, the question here is the safety, because you can't talk about being feminine. Boy, you can't run. So,
what we really do is there are some colleges and schools that teach online behavior, how to proceed, how to when the child feels that hard surrender and you're not hard surrender hard. So those things how to teach them how to safely, and I think we just need to teach them how to be safe online.
The question is, whose responsibility is this? And Andy, could you help us with it? Whose responsibility is it to make sure that the women are safe? We are moving forward an agenda that is great, and it provides solutions. It helps Africa leapfrog and get into the future. Digital transformation is absolutely amazing. But how do we make sure these women are safe? Is it the role of the government? As Karen is saying, the parent. Is it the role of the parent to ensure that whose role is it?
The answer, of course, is yes.
Questions, yes.
No, they're great. They're great questions, but the answer, of course, is yes. Like any threat to any of our children, there are threats in the world, and it's absolutely the responsibility of parents to help children to be aware of risk, and that's true of whether it's about cutting their thumb or about accessing the internet. It's certainly true that it's the responsibility of government to support them in that, both in the education programs that Karen's talking about and in the technical measures you can do to reduce the level of threat. There's a lot you can do in terms of building infrastructure in the right way. And what's great, particularly in Rwanda, is the advice that they're taking is state of the art. So then it goes up into the international bodies, and to organisations like Karen's, who can help lead the way in terms of their thinking and so on. So it's a multi-layered approach, and that's the only way with which for us to address these issues, particularly when things are evolving so quickly.
In a world where parenting is not like it used to be when I was growing up. I am at work pretty much 8 hours a day. I don't have that much time to tell my child the do's and the don'ts. And not that many countries have that as a priority. Is this summit, is there anything done?
Go back to what we do and say what measures can we begin to implement. So at least I want to thank you for being able to bring this up, because we're going to make sure that we have our own strategy of how to include it in our work.
I'm looking forward to the next Transform Africa. Maybe there'll be a panel about this. All right.
See, what's really interesting about technology is technology advances faster than policy or law or human behavior. So oftentimes we'll invent something and say, what have we done? Now we have something dangerous. This is very, very scary. Yeah, how do we fix this? How do we put laws in place? So IEEE recently started an initiative that we call Ethics in Technology. So starting from the design of the product, what ethical standards can we design so that those things will be thought of ahead of time? So if Mark Zuckerberg had been part of our initiative on ethics in technology, the question for him would have been, how do you protect people online on your Facebook product? So it's a fascinating new field that blends technology and ethics. And I think if we can start talking about that more, we'll have safe online, we'll have safe vehicles, we'll have safe artificial intelligence algorithms, and it's a really interesting field that's opening up.
Absolutely. Well, we now have to take a short break, but when we return, I would like us to widen the scope and talk about upload versus download on this continent. It's quite appalling. We have more people downloading stuff than uploading stuff. So that says a lot about the innovation levels, the creativity levels, and how do we move girls towards the right direction. All right, you're still watching Prime Time Live. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Reka tusuze mwese abakurikiye televiziyo y'u Rwanda, tunabaye ikaze mu kiganiro Tinyuka Urashoboye.
Sinigeze ndeka kuboha rwose, mbikunda cyane cyane mu bintu bimba mu buzima habamo kuboha.
Ikintu numva nabwira abagore cyangwa urubyiruko, niyo yaba atarimo gukora wenda nk'ibi ngibi by'ubukorikori turimo gukora, ako mu buryo bwo kwitinyuka nabashishikariza yuko bakwishyira hamwe bakajya mu bibina bibahuza kugira ngo bagire ukwitinyuka kandi bagire ingufu mu byo bumva bakora biteza imbere batarinze gusaba.
Rero nahumuriza abana b'abakobwa mbabwira nti icy'ingenzi mugira intego,
icy'ingenzi ntibashira ubwoba.
Welcome back. It is Prime Time Live, and we are coming to you from the Transform Africa Summit. And what we're talking about is digital inclusion. You can go to our Twitter page at RBA Rwanda, and you can as well look me up at Isabelle Masozera at Prime Time Live RW. What do you think can be done to ensure that women and girls are included on this digital transformation journey that Africa is on? Well, let's go back to where we are. More downloads than uploads on the continent when you go elsewhere, Europe, America, China, anywhere else you go, you find that it's leveled. But here in Africa, we are consuming more than we are putting anything out there. And Andy, I would like you to weigh in on this. What can be done? Because that says a lot about the creativity and innovation levels.
Well, it does, but it also talks about the thirst for knowledge. Africa has a huge thirst for knowledge, and it wants to leapfrog. It wants to be state of the art. So the desire to download, sometimes they're downloading movies, but actually a lot of the time they're downloading information.
Worse than movies sometimes.
I have no idea what you're talking about. I do think though it is a sign of the transition that Africa is going through. As Africa becomes more a contributor, it will create more economic growth here, and the greater the amount of technical knowledge-based exports, the more the opportunity to grow the economy. So I think it's definitely a statistic that's well worth watching. I think it's definitely a statistic that's well worth driving the other direction. But I think the mindset behind it should be about, okay, it's not a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing today in terms of where we are in the cycle.
Depending on what you are downloading.
Moving on. What I would say, and I think it will change some of these dynamics, because we've seen it change the dynamics in other economies. As the new technologies drive the cost per bit, i.e. how much it costs you to download a movie or upload a movie or a video or a blog that you're creating, as that cost drops, and we will see it drop significantly over the next few years, that will make it easier for people to contribute and will help drive the economy.
Absolutely. Karen?
A couple of days ago, this is back to your question, a couple of days ago I gave a lecture at the University of Rwanda, the College of Science and Technology. And my lecture was geared towards the female students. I was talking about skills that they can develop. One of them is be visible. And someone asked me, how can I be visible? How can I get my name out there? Yes. So I talked to them about posting on Facebook, and I told them about how to write a blog and some of the fundamental rules for writing blogs. And this, I think, is a way that they will then start producing content of their own. Because if you are a student and you're getting ready to look for a job, for instance, if you have a blog or a presence on a network where you write a paragraph about your senior project, your capstone project, then when employers start looking for you, they're going to find this is a very intelligent, well-spoken young person. And it also gives women the courage. That was another skill that I was trying to tell them. Take risks, have courage. So take a chance, write something, give your opinion, read an article, and write a commentary on it. And anybody can do this in today's world to help boost that content that's leaving Africa and going out to the rest of the world. Because I'll bet you people around the world would be fascinated to hear what Africans have to say.
Very true. And you were talking about the power of social media, the power of the internet, and being one of the platforms before somebody waits for venture capital, for angel funding. This is an actual platform. But again, it's not being utilized.
But absolutely, you're right. I want to just go back to something that Karen said, because I think it's also very important to say, but where does the codification of knowledge begin? And then what are the rewards for codifying knowledge? Because here for us, historically, if you're looking maybe hundreds of years ago, we were coming from being oral cultures, now trying to codify. How do we encourage codification? So if you look, for example, in other parts of the most developed world, people codify knowledge into something. It becomes a book. it becomes a patent, it becomes intellectual property, and you're able to monetize it. We need to be able to bring those kinds of concepts of intellectual property.
Yes.
Because when I went, for example, to K-Lab and I met with all the female entrepreneurs, one of their biggest concerns is by actually sharing something tangible that I've written down about my idea, how do I know that somebody will not come and steal it?
Yeah.
So intellectual property becomes very important as a way to be able to really encourage.
And,
so
and
there's
when
to be
you
an
bring that
endpoint.
up, there's very little regulation and protection when you put your stuff on the internet. How can that be looked into?
So I think you're right. Once you put something onto the internet, it becomes you are publishing
Public
something.
property, yeah.
And I think you need to be conscious that that's what you're doing. And if it's something you want to protect, you need to follow the appropriate mechanisms to do so. But at the same time, you can put enough out there to get people interested and excited. In the UK university courses and UK MBA courses now, they teach students how to use LinkedIn and to create a virtual presence and profile, because they recognize that most employers are going to use that as a mechanism to find people. And I think this interview and actually the last few days have really made us think. But one of the small but very simple interventions is to make sure that gets added into, for example, the Carnegie Mellon course in ICT here. Yeah. I don't know whether they do it today or they don't, but it's a very simple change that they could make that would really help those students attract better and more interesting jobs. Just related to that and related to publishing, I just want to build on Karen's point about talking about challenges and problems and opportunities. I work in the UK in the middle of what's called Silicon Roundabout. So they have Silicon Valley well, we do things on a smaller scale in the UK. So we have Silicon Roundabout, which is a roundabout called Old Street, which happens to be where my company's based. But around us are a whole bunch of really exciting tech companies. They've all grown up around us. We run hackathon events where over a weekend we'll invite those young entrepreneurs to come in and try and solve a problem. Well, they like nothing more than young people in the world, all around the world, like nothing more than to make a difference.
Yes.
And if we can set them problems where you can make a difference, they will get so engaged. So one of our opportunities is to link young people in Africa with young people in Silicon Roundabout and in Silicon Valley, and to get them excited about the problems and work together on them.
Forward to you starting here, because as you know, Rwanda has been named the Silicon Valley of Africa. So yeah, we're looking forward to such collaborations. But let's dig a little bit deeper, going back to the women. Again, and going back to the issue of uploading versus downloading. Now, I was looking at the statistics, and it was quite interesting to see what women are actually doing when they are online. And what I found was entertainment. The biggest percentage. That is what is actually happening. So how do we steer them away from that to using the internet as a tool to make money, to become entrepreneurs and have a platform to sell their ideas? What do you think could be some of the steps that could be taken? Earlier you spoke about education, but are these some of the things that are being discussed at the summit here?
This is an out-of-the-box idea. If entertainment is what they're downloading, what if we created a program where there are women using the internet to do these great things, and they would become inspiring to the women who are watching it? Similar to when you watch a TV show and it's a crime scene investigator, that's what you want to be. So what if we had this show they would download to show, wow, this woman did these amazing things? So that's a thought.
Indeed, out of the box.
The next program, actually, that you're going to
We've been having Festa Gorillas and we're having Miss Geek. We should have her up there.
But one of the things that I also think we need to understand, we actually need to understand women's time and what they do with their time. Because what we know, especially in Africa, is women have a time poverty. They have full-time careers, but then they get home, they're cooking for family, there are children that have to be taken care of, homeworks have to be done, At the end of the day, when you're exhausted, what do you want to do? You just want something to just unwind, right? So maybe first let's begin to address the time poverty of women. If we could have more men be champions for women, like His Excellency the President, who's a champion with the He for She campaign.
Absolutely.
And for these men to translate it within the home, of being able to really say to the woman, let's have a schedule in which some days of the week I will take care of the children and the cooking.
I'll be Mr. Mom.
Exactly, so that you can have your time to run to run a business and think about all the different things that are online.
Yeah.
Maybe then we can really open up women's time to do other things beyond just the need to decompress because they're so exhausted at the end of the day.
Yeah. Very true. All right, and now we can't wrap up before we talk about what's happening at Transform Africa. We're talking about how to use ICTs to affect the African economies positively. I would like to come to you, Andy. Could you talk to us a little bit more about that?
Of course. So that the first underlying thought, which is what sits behind Smart Africa and Transform Africa Summit, is if we can connect African citizens to the digital economy through the internet, then you remove many of the barriers that makes the African nations at a disadvantage to the rest of the world. In fact, it probably puts them at an advantage to the rest of the world. The people I've met in Africa are certainly no less smart than I've met elsewhere. Yeah. They're certainly no less driven, and I would argue probably more driven than most of the people that I meet around the world. And they've got some real challenges and some real opportunities. So the concept is, if you can connect those smart, driven people to a digital economy where they're competing with, frankly, very expensive labor in other nations, they have the opportunity to not only compete but to win. So that's the underlying thought. What then goes beyond that is to say, how can I leverage that technology across all sorts of different industries here in Africa? So we're talking about. So one of the very interesting subjects of conversation throughout this week has been the Internet of Things. So you start by saying, well, why is that relevant? When I haven't got everybody connected, why am I worrying about connecting devices instead of connecting people?
That's true.
Well, the answer is because it can start to create the wealth and the time that we've been talking about. So, for example, if we can implement some very low-cost technology that will control valves that release water to irrigate plants, you can drive productivity of farmland up not by a few percent, but by 20 or 30 times. You can make massive differences in the productivity, which makes massive differences in terms of the amount of money that can be made from those farms. And the cost of technology to do that is tiny relative to the results that it comes up. So Internet of Things is all about using very smart, very cheap technology that can control things that can make a massive difference. And we're seeing that in agriculture, we're seeing that even throughout the cities in terms of making transport and logistics work, in terms of making power work. You can do load balancing on power networks such that the lights don't go off by making very small, simple changes with very cheap technology. Yeah. And that's just hugely exciting in terms of the impact it can have here in Africa. And if we can become expert at that here in Rwanda, we can export that not just into other African nations who also need it, but also to the rest of the world, because those kind of problems are actually replicated in many, many other countries.
Absolutely. Your company is one of those that are signing MOUs during this particular event. Can you tell us anything about that, or is it absolutely off limits?
Well, officially, I'm not going to talk about it. I'll tell you that
unofficially,
we'll be making an announcement tomorrow. But one of the reasons we're here is that IEEE wants to sign agreements with continental organizations so that we can bring our resources to help serve their agenda. Agendas like education, workforce development. IEEE certainly wants to build small communities of engineers that will flourish when they start working with each other. And finally being able to interface with policymakers so that we as technologists can explain to policymakers this is what the Internet of Things is before they go and develop policy around it.
Yes.
And vice versa, we want to be able to learn from the policymakers. I had an experience recently I was in a room full of policymakers. I had no idea what they were talking about. I didn't speak their language any more than they spoke
Very
mine.
technical things that only they
Exactly.
understand.
So if we can come together and spend the time to ask each other, what do you mean by that
this.
term? Then we will do something very, very powerful. So
Speak
this
the
is
same
this is
language.
sort of what we're doing with this agreement that we're going to be
All right.
announcing.
Well, are the women catered for in any way as you work on this?
Well, I'll change the subject a little bit. On Friday morning, the Smart Africa Women's Summit will begin. And during that, I will be speaking, hopefully to inspire women, and of course men too, to join the ranks of engineers and technologists. Because I believe here in Rwanda we have a very big shortage of engineers, that there are some 20,000 needed and there's maybe a couple thousand. So being able to inspire and send that message that the delegates here will take back to their constituents and say, we can do this. We can build an engineering workforce that will really raise the situations around not only Rwanda but throughout the whole continent.
Very good work there. Well, let's go back to where we started a little bit. We talked about how many women are actually doing things in ICT, and I want to talk about collaboration and the power of that and how that affects inclusion. The private sector and the public sector. Many a times, African countries fail to marry the two, and when you're not walking the same journey, it's hard to accomplish what we want to accomplish. And I'll come to you, Paul. What do you think can be done to make sure that we are on the same direction, that collaboration is strong across African countries?
Well, one, I think that we need to be able to know which frameworks, and we need to have an agreement of frameworks, and this is where MOUs become very important between the private sector along with public-private institutions. How do we create more dynamic public-private partnerships, essentially, that will fund some of this? First, we have to be able to know for the private sector what is in it for the private sector, but look at the African continent. I mean, this is a 1 billion people market, and we know it's a youthful population. We know that it's a growing middle class. So, there's the market for it. So first, understanding what the private sector wants, and then obviously government has to be able to create the enabling environment for this work to be able to happen. Yes. I think here, Rwanda is leading in this regard in terms of creating an enabling environment.
Yes.
But I think then we also need to be able to bring in civil society and NGOs and be able to say what is going to be the role of a civil society and NGOs, because to some degree they try to really push on social innovation. They try to push on rural innovation. They want to make sure that rural voices are heard. We heard today when His Excellency in his opening remarks, what did he say? He said they should access to technology. We should not discriminate between urban and rural, male, female, rich, poor. There should be access for everybody. And I think public-private partnerships are what can enable all that to happen.
Absolutely. Well, the private sector is indeed struggling, and not just here in Rwanda, but across Africa. Women are lagging behind. But here in Rwanda, the government has done a lot to make sure that women are included and they're given a push. Yet in the private sector, that self-motivation is not there. And earlier, like I said, that collaboration seems to be the answer to closing that chasm. What do you think are the steps that could be taken to strengthen the public sector and private sector relations across the continent?
What's kind of interesting is Rwanda is so good at this relative to so many other nations. In my role, I serve about 100 governments around the world. And therefore I travel a lot talking to government officials. And so often government officials say, no, I can't talk to business because talking to business has a dirty connotation. It's regarded as a bad thing for somebody in government. From the president down in Rwanda, the message is very clear. I want a relationship between government and private business that is good for the nation, not one that is corrupt, one that is clean, one that is benefiting the citizens of the nations, and therefore because of that policy of saying this is not a bad thing, but it has to be done the right way. Rwanda has put policies and procedures in place that allows things such as the MOUs that Inmarsat signed this week and IEEE signed this week. Those MOUs are about collaboration with government to encourage private sector finance to be added to government investment to help businesses in Rwanda grow. And that's got to be a good thing. So I have to say, I'm so impressed with what's been done already.
Okay.
Can more be done? Yes. But what the most important thing, if anything, the most important thing is to take the pilots that are working and to sell those stories. So one of the opportunities I think for the media, and particularly as we're talking together, one of the opportunities is for you to start telling those stories of success, because when young women hear what other young women have been able to do.
Yes.
By getting companies like mine excited about their ideas, then people will get the idea of what's possible.
Yeah.
And as soon as they do that, this thing will take
Let's
off.
change the narrative. Let's talk about the positive.
Change the
happening.
story.
All right. Now, I want to hear from you. There's a lot of women out there that are wondering why Africa. She has access to any other place to be interested in. Why come to Africa? And not just women, even the men out there. Even I'm asking that question. What's the one thing that attracted you to this once called dark continent that is extremely bright today? But what is it that compelled you?
You're right, I've been to a lot of places in the world, but this was an opportunity that is absolutely astounding. So our mission at IEEE is advancing technology for the benefit of humanity. And that's the most important part, the benefit of humanity. So for me to be able to come and visit African countries and give IEEE resources back and inspiration is how I fulfill that mission. I'm also, at the end of my working career, I retired so that I could become president of IEEE. And when you get to this point in life, you don't need mentoring, you don't need career advice. You're not so much looking forward at the next job, but you're looking at how can I give back. And I can't think of anywhere else on earth where there's a better opportunity for someone like me to come and give back my experience and my dedication. And I have to tell you, the African people are the most friendly and warm. The idea that when you say, I'll tell you a story. We were in the airport and there was a gate agent who said, "Good morning, how are you?" And I said, "Is this the gate that I need to be at?" She said, "Good morning, how are you?" And I stopped and said, "I am so sorry. I'm fine, how are you? I'm usually a nice person." But I see this everywhere I go. You say good morning, you respond. It's a sign of respect and acknowledgement of people. And I've never experienced that before. Later that day, down in the gate area as we were getting ready to board, that same agent was there. I went over to her and I said, "How are you doing this afternoon?" And she laughed and laughed. But to learn a small lesson like that has been incredible. So I appreciate the opportunity so much to be here.
Well, my story is going to be in form of a question or maybe a game. Can we play the game? The game is a question. Can Africa lead the fourth digital transformation of the entire world, or in industrial revolution? Can Africa lead the fourth industrial revolution? And this is a yes or no question, which will wrap up our conversation.
Yes, it can. Absolutely.
So it's a triple yes from you.
Yes.
That should have been a triple yes from IEEE. But yes, okay.
Of course, the answer is yes. It's got so much going for it. It's got the personalities that Karen's just talking about. It's got the resources. It's got the scale, and it's got the opportunity to leapfrog and do something new and exciting.
Okay.
Yes.
And I say yes, there's an example that I experienced, and that's mobile banking here. Mobile banking has gone way beyond what people do in Europe and in the United States. So there's no need for credit cards anymore. The simple interface can be used by anybody, and it's an amazing innovation that is nowhere else on the world. So I say yes.
And can
Isabelle,
the women be part of that?
Isabelle, all you have to do is look in Rwanda. It's happening. This is what I'm trying to say. Is we don't need to look and sort of guess. It's happening right here. Everything from Ms. Geek, from the best performing girls, when you look at their innovation, from the young women at Gashora Academy, from Clarice of Hehe. I mean, there's so much that's happening here that's been done by young women. You just go to K-Lab. They're all over the place. So, yes, It can.
All
We can
right.
leapfrog.
All
We
right.
can be leaders.
We need that parting shot as we close, and I'll start with Andy, the only man on the panel tonight. So, what would be your closing remarks as we conclude this discussion about the digital inclusion? But the conversation continues, by the way, on Twitter. So, use the hashtag PrimetimeRW and continue talking, please.
Well, firstly, my concluding remarks is firstly how much I've enjoyed the last hour. I mean, fantastic to have that conversation. My concluding remarks are the opportunities out there. Rwanda is already leading, and Africa has the opportunity to lead the world.
All right. Okay, we'll come to you.
I would say that finally in my life, I'm encouraged that there will be more women in engineering and STEM fields because we are talking about it. And this gives me hope for the future. I think that it's not just a problem with women, it's a problem with men also. And when I was at the lecture at University of Rwanda, I looked at the boys and said, you need to help. You need to include the girls in your discussions and in your activities to make them feel more comfortable. So I think we're ready to take that next step and really, really transform the way that women are represented.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Karen. All right.
No, I just wanted to just talk about two sessions that I'm very excited about. One, like Karen, I'll be speaking during the Smart the Smart Africa Women's Summit on Friday, and I think we're going to make an announcement as well on something that we're doing for women in innovation and how it's going to add to digital inclusion. But tomorrow we begin the deliberations for Africa Smart Women and Girls Roundtable. So I think just already from there we're going to be unfleshing all the pipeline of exactly how we're going to connect all the various programs that are happening throughout Africa for girls in ICT and women in STEM. But one of the things that I think is also important to say is whenever we talk about space for women and digital inclusion for women, it should never seem like somehow we're excluding men. The women's space is a very inclusive space. Okay, it's a space for gender equity. What we're really saying is let's all come together, let there be parity. So that's one of the first things that I wanted to be able to emphasize. But I also just really want to say we have great role models in His Excellency the President here and the First Lady. They're leading amazing initiatives really, from one laptop per child all the way to just all the programs that they're supporting within the tertiary education and how they're championing women, girls in ICT, women in STEM. There are hackathons taking place that are being done by young women. There's coding for young women. So we just need to be able to see what is already working and just scale it up. And I'm excited by this.
Thank you. Very well said. Thank you so much for making the time to talk to me. I've enjoyed this absolutely 100%. So we're looking forward to the next Transform Africa Summit. And of course, going back to what we talked about, protecting the women and the children and everybody out there that is coming along on this journey with us. But yes, that's all the time that we had for you this week. Until next time, it's Prime Time Live. Isabelle Masozera is my name. God bless and thanks for watching.